get the YouTube link and put on my LinkedIn?
Hello, Muller. All right, I know we had a bit of a panic attack, a bit of a tech problem for all of you guys who have been waiting anxiously for our show. Our apologies, we had some technical problem, but we are back. Hi, Muller. How are you?
I am good.
Okay, no worries. I know you are breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And that's why we are speaking about Resolute Leaders this month, right? The month of July, and today is our first show, right? And I know for viewers who have logged in and wondering what this show is about, this is the Leadership in Flow Asia, where we have our guests from within Asia, right? And we speak to them to understand about their growth, their personal growth, their leadership growth, and how they grow their business. So we've been having a lot of nuggets from these quiet leaders in Asia. And today we have one such leader. His name is Viju Chakra, and we will call him Viju for short. It's easier for me too. So what's going to happen is this. We're going to bring Viju on board soon in a minute. Who is Viju? He is with Red Hat. He is the VP for APAC Commercial Sales in Red Hat. And he's part of the leadership team. Now, Viju has got more than 25 years of experience under his belt. He's also worked with Microsoft and many other companies. And he's also an alumni of the Harvard Business School. Now, on top of that, he does a lot of marathons, right? I'm very curious to find out which other countries he went to. And he raises a lot of funds for charities. So let's bring him on, Mr. Viju himself.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Hey, Viju. How are you, sir?
Good. It's kind of weird listening to somebody talk about me, right? It's just so unreal. But thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me on the show.
No, thank you for saying yes. And like what Muller would say, we were so excited during the pre-show, right? And that was just getting to know you at the surface. And now we're going to go deeper. And I'm sure all our fans who are logged in for the show are going to have a fantastic time knowing more about you. Right?
Yeah,
so
disappoint them, right?
No, definitely not. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to start the ball rolling, Muller. I know you do a couple of things at the back. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Don't worry. All right.
So I'm going to focus on Viju's beautiful red glasses while I calm myself down.
No worries.
It's okay.
Now, what Viju said was this: every 10 minutes he's going to change his glasses, so we need to guess what are the different colors. We'll talk about that very soon. He's got a whole range of different glasses. It's fantastic. But before we get into your glasses, and today's topic is about clarity of identity. It's not about your glasses, though, right? But it is about you, right?
Yes.
Now, I know you talk a lot about leadership is a journey without a destination, right? You talk a lot about that. Now, even if you're a Star Trek fan, which I know you are, It says, we go where no man has gone before. It appears like there is a destination. But yours is, we just go. Leadership is a journey without a destination. Tell us, what is your thinking behind that?
I think, thanks for the question, right, Ashok. And, this is, for me, it's been a fascinating journey so far. And I still don't think I've even come halfway through my leadership journey, right? Leadership for me is really like life, right? It's about constantly adapting to the circumstances, recognizing that nothing will remain static. It isn't, right? Because every time a leader gets into a situation, it's different, right? And we are learning. We use our experience. We try and use as much as we can on what we have learned and try and help in the situation. But at times we also make mistakes. We learn, we adapt, we learn from people in the team, and then we keep going, right? So it's constantly a learning journey, I would say. And I have this joke that I always say this, right? We are leaders always arriving, never arrived, right? So we are constantly going, trying to get to the place that we need to get to, or bring the team to the next level. And there's always another level to go to as well. So learning constantly is also fascinating, right? You're kind of thinking about what's new, what's next. There's always room for improvement, and self improvement should, I think, in my view, be part of the DNA of any leader, right? I mean, think about it. There are lots and lots of teams depending on us, people depending on us. So if we are not sharp, how do we help them become sharper, right? So we got to constantly keep sharpening ourselves so that we can help the teams really well. And I just want to give an example, and it's very interesting. I read this book, Moonshot, by Dr. Albert Bourla, who is the chairman and CEO of Pfizer. And I was just thinking, right? Do you think that he knew everything about leading his team and getting the vaccine out in like record time, right, for COVID? And when he started, he had no clue. He had to learn along the way, make mistakes and whatnot. And he talks about how the 9 month journey of making the impossible possible. And that was a journey for him as well, learning as quickly as possible, using the experience he has, making the mistakes and trying to get the vaccine out so that we can save lives. So I think as the best ones are constantly learning. And that's what I meant by it's a journey. It's not a destination. You've never arrived. You're always arriving.
Right. Thank you very much. So what I'm hearing is the thinking behind leadership is a journey is all about the learning, right? That means you learn from your actions, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from feedback, but it's constantly reflecting about who you are, how you're impacting your team. Because he said, if you want to make them sharp, you need to be sharp first, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
thank you very much for that, that definition of what leadership is. It's a journey without destination. And you know what? That creates a lot of ambiguity, doesn't it? And which also means to say you need to be comfortable with what you do not know.
Yep.
How do you deal with that?
So this is a very interesting question because I have, there's always this leadership training that happens in Red Hat. We conduct
Okay.
quite a bit, and one of them I had the privilege and honor of coming up with that. We call it the TTLA program, which is the Technology Thought Leadership Accelerator program. Every year when I do it, I have this one line I tell every cohort, right? Even before I say it, they kind of know because they would have heard it from other cohort. Is you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's where the learning is, that's where the growth is, right? If everything is going well, all the dials are in the right places, that means you're really not pushing the boundaries, you're really not learning. So I think that's extremely important to understand, right? And it's easier said than done because
Mhm.
when you're human, right?
Yeah,
You do not like change, right? And change
absolutely.
very, very difficult to accept, right? But change is always around you. There's only one thing which always happens and will definitely continue happening is change. And that's happened from time immemorial, right? So I think, understanding that and, getting out of that fear, because the fear first thing is, I'm really comfortable. Why do I have to do this? It's not going to
Mm.
really help me, right? And what if I fail? It's the first question everybody asks, right? What if I do this? And what do I take the next step, the bold step, and what happens? And that's when courage is extremely important, right? When you have the courage and the guts to take the first step forward. And when you do, you might fail, right? And one of my friends always used to tell me this, right? If you try, you might fail, but if you don't try, you'll never win, right? So you got to try, right? You got to take the next step, go for it, learn, make sure that you've got people around you who will help you through the process. Your teams around you are there for that as well. Not just you being there for the team is there for you as well. And then keep going, right? And that's, I think, where you'll really be comfortable with this. And it doesn't come instantly, right? You got to
Mm.
constantly keep doing this. That's the only way you will get used to that whole cycle, because you've done this before. When you take the next step, it's going to be hard, but after that you'll get easier, and then guess what? You're in a different level altogether. So I think, keep trying the small things, try with that, and then just keep going. So I think that's extremely important, because that also comes to self-discovery, right? Because when you get to
Right.
a uncomfortable place, you really start discovering things about yourself. And for me, that's extremely fascinating.
That's extremely what?
Fascinating.
Fascinating. Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. What you mentioned was, if you don't try, you will never win. I like that. Probably going to use that. And you spoke about a lot of things that we normally hear. Things like, you got to try. If you don't try, you'll never know. You got to have the courage. It's about the fear and all of. I get all of that. We have heard all of that in the surface, but we're always sitting at the cusp. You know, how did you even get to that space where you said, you know what, I want to now jump in. I want to discover myself. What was the trigger that ignited you into your self-awareness journey?
I think, I need to give a lot of credit to the leaders that I've worked with, the coaches, the mentors, right, who are
Okay.
always there to kind of push you a little bit more than you want to be pushed, right? And that's important, right? And the reason why I'm talking about that is because the safe environment, or the environment that your leadership creates for you to grow, is very important, right? Because I take this very personally when it comes to my team as well.
Mhm.
If you don't create a safe environment for them to try, for them to fail, for them to learn, and know that if they've fallen, we are not going to go there and kick them. We're going to give them a hand and lift them up.
Okay.
And we make sure that that happens, right? So I think, first and foremost, you need to find an environment with people you can talk to, a sounding board. Leadership is also a very lonely journey, so we need to make sure the higher up you go, it becomes, it's like this triangle right at the top, it becomes
Right.
less and less,
Right.
right? It becomes harder. So you need to be able to find people who you can really have this open discussion, someone who you trust, someone who can push you a bit more, right? I've had great mentors who've taught me a lot, and they've also pushed me in the right direction, pushed the thinking, and so that I can break out of that comfort zone, right? It's
Okay.
difficult to do by yourself. I mean, for me, I think it's impossible, because if I didn't have them, I don't think I would have taken the first step for so many of the things that I've done, right? So I think
Sure.
it's
Sure.
important.
So, okay. So what I'm getting is your self-discovery part was also supported by coaches and mentors, which is important, because we need people to help us push to the boundaries. But I want to go back to that point of time when you said, you know what, I think this is enough. I need to experience something. Because for you to accept a coach and mentor, right, there must have been a motivator, either something that pushed you away or pushed you towards. I'm just trying to figure out that trigger point that where you said, you know what, done, this is it.
It's not a person though; it's a book, right? And
It's a book.
that's the thing which was very interesting. And I had this conversation with one of my coaches before, and then she stopped me and she said, "You need to read this book." And I said, "What book is that?" It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck, right? It is all
Mindset.
about,
Okay.
yeah. And it was because I was always, and exactly what you said, right, Ashok, I was always in a state where, a little bit more, but I really don't want to go there. What do I do? Where do I, push? Yes, my mentors push me a bit and I get there. But to believe that this is normal, right? To read that book, and when Kelda talks about how failure is important, is part of learning, and she goes into these multitudes of examples of
Yes.
where this has happened, why it's important, why we need to think through this. She even has a chapter on, how you should encourage your children. You don't call them, you don't say, hey, great, you're really smart. You say, oh, very good, you did a great job. Think about all the work that you did to get here, rather than, hey, you're really smart, right? So he instills in them this 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 ability to start thinking about more than, hey, I'm great, but more like, hey, if I try, I can keep trying, and even if I fail, it's okay, I'll get up and I'll go, right? So
Sure.
I think that book really helped, right? I was fortunate. I was also in Microsoft at that time, and Satya Nadella also talked about that book, and he said you all should read it, because that's when Microsoft was changing in terms of the culture. And I think that helped not just me, but a lot of people. A lot of people really benefited from that, right? So uh, it's and usually people ask me this question that you asked, right? What's the trigger? It's usually never one thing. The book
Yes.
helped, the mentors helped, the coaches helped, my team helped, a little bit, right? But that one thing that really pushed me across was probably, mindset really pushed me. And I always, whenever I mentor people, right, within the teams, I always tell them, go read the book, and I see that they've got a mental block, and I say, it helped me. It might help you, it might not, but at least you'll get closer to making that jump than, standing behind and waiting, right? So that's what happened.
Right, right. So the it's nice to know that you mentioned it's Carol Dweck's mindset, the book that helped you push. And you mentioned Satya Nadella. Yes, I was reading about him, about how he encourages a growth mindset. But there was also another book that he had encouraged all leaders to read, Nonviolent Communication. Uh, I don't know whether you've read that, and I think that was also a brilliant book. You know,
Yeah.
and I can see how both of these can be combined to be very powerful. You know,
Yes,
in leading
yes,
teams.
definitely. And then
Right.
that's one thing, right? You talked about leadership journey, right? And this is extremely important, and I think I learned it much later in life. My mother tried really hard to make me read a lot earlier in my life, and I hardly did. But I realized, later that, wow, you learn so much, right, within the book, and it can really transform your life. I'm a big non-fiction reader. I love autobiographies, and I'm always fascinated by people and how they turn things around. And I think, that's important, right? It helps, and for everyone it's a different trigger. For me, it's most of the time is the books.
Right, right. Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. And Bala, before you come on board, I just want to share with you, Viju, I agree with you. Reading is very, very important, right? It really expands our mind, and that is why we love the show Leadership in Flow Asia, because it's like reading a leadership book every week. Every week, we have a leader on the ground telling us exactly how to be an impactful leader, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Well,
Mer, you have a question, or shall I carry on? I'm
No,
so excited.
my turn.
Okay, your turn. Yes. Okay, let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, for those who've joined us, thank you very much for staying patient and joining us. And I know some people are going to miss out because we're not live on LinkedIn, unfortunately, because we had some technical error. So we are on YouTube. I've put the YouTube link everywhere where it's posted. So hopefully they'll come in. Otherwise, you're going to miss the live interview, and I'm really, really sorry. Okay, now that I've got my breath in, Viju, you said something that probably everybody knows, right? You said get ready to be comfortable with the uncomfortable on one hand. And on the other hand, you're saying, okay, now as a leader, I need to make people feel safe,
yep.
right? And of course, then you went on to actually talk about, how the book Mindset by Carol Dweck helped you in how you then, introduce it to other people too. But I'm sure as a leader, I mean, as positive and as great as we are, we wish everybody were like us, could think like us, right? I'm very sure you meet people who push back, right, with change when it's
Yes.
really necessary for the business, right? So, how do you manage to get people? What do you do to get people to be comfortable with the uncomfortable while making them feel safe?
I think first thing is listening, right? I think it's extremely important as leaders, right? We have this tendency of talking a lot, right, and not listening. It's typical, right? We like our own voices, but I think listening is extremely important, right? Really stopping and listening. So I give you an example of one of my mentors told me this. It was fascinating for me, and I've always been using that ever since, right? Asking for feedback, right? And I'll come to why I'm talking about feedback when you ask me this question. When you ask for feedback, usually, and this happens with everyone, nothing comes back, right? You have one-on-one, give me some feedback. No, everything is going well. No, no, I have nothing to say to you, right? And and then you realize that this doesn't really help, right? In the conversation, I really don't know how you're thinking. So one of my mentors, my first mentor actually, Andrew Pickup, told me this. I'll tell you what to do, and this is what he's been doing for ages. He said, tell them I need feedback about me. The next 5 minutes we are just going to talk about it. You're just going to talk about that, right? Feedback for me. And he said the rule of the game is you only thing you can do is say thank you, right? I can't defend myself, I can't say anything, right? And so what happens? So he said, this is what's going to happen. You're going to do this, and they're not going to say anything for 5 minutes. There's going to be awkward silence. And then I said, okay, then what do I do? This is the only other thing you can say. Take your time, right? And guess what happens after 2 or 3 rounds of this? They will come prepared because they hate the awkward silence. They know you're going to ask this question. They know the first 5 minutes is all about this. And being a leader, you will learn how to shut up and learn how to listen. And that was fascinating because it's true. And then after that, you can't shut them, right? They got lots of things to say about you, which is a different problem. But I think that's extremely important as leaders for us to realize that you got and that was the safe space that I was talking about. They knew that the only thing that I would say is thank you. I'm not going to push back. I will give you the space, and this is your time to tell me how you feel, right? And I think that that's extremely important to start, putting in place. It's a very simple thing, but these things have got an impact on how your teams react, right? When it comes to change, I think communication and over communication is extremely important, right? And the reason why I mentioned that is because whenever we are trying to do a change, uh, we try and articulate it thinking that because we have probably been through all the thinking and all the hey, I don't think we should do this, to accepting the change, and then delivering the news or communicating it to the teams. But the teams are receiving it for the first time, right? So they will also go through that whole process of accepting and saying no and whatnot, right? There's a whole cycle to that. So you got to first give them an opportunity to ask questions, listen, articulate as many times as possible why we are doing this in the clearest possible way. And when you do that, what you have created is you've made sure there is no vacuum in information, right? Because whenever there's a vacuum in information and people have a vacuum in their head that no, I don't really understand this doesn't connect. What do? They fill it up with things that they think is the reason why certain changes are happening. And when that happens, finish, right? You're here, you're talking about this, and you're on the moon, and they're probably somewhere else in Mars or something, and it's difficult. They'll never connect. So I think it's extremely important to keep the lines open, make sure we over communicate, ensure that you fill the gaps with actual facts, and then work through the change. It also, the other thing is, I say this all the time, and let's also not be so particular that, this is the only way to do it, right? Maybe going from A to B, you might need to take another step, right, in between, and be open to that. You'll still get there. It might be slower, but it might help the people cope with the change. So I think doing that also is absolutely necessary, right, to help them through the change. I think these are some of the ways I've dealt with. It's not easy. Yeah, change is the hardest thing. And also the other side is some might not like it and might say, this is not for me, and which is okay, right? Which is okay, because not every change and not everything that we do um, might align with someone else's goals, values, and the way they want things to happen, right? So I think it's important to understand that that's when you might say, okay, this is probably not for me, and be prepared, right? We might have to part ways as well, right? But that's the worst case scenario, but that's also acceptable because both sides have decided this might not work, right? So help as much as you can, get them there, make sure there's no vacuums, make vacuum, ensure that the thinking is there, and they understand why, and listen, right? And then most of the time people do give it a chance and try and work through that.
Nice, nice. I think what was for me, what was big, because I think every other leader whom we speak to will tell us about how important it is to listen, right? And sometimes I'm wondering whether we are over communicating listening, but you have just validated that over communication is actually the right thing to do, right? Having said that, I'm very curious to know, have you ever got any feedback that you're over communicating?
Um I would say, the feedback has always been, yes, we know, right? We've heard it about 3 times, but there's always a group which will feel that way because they get it fast, right? But there's also another group that usually I always say, sometimes there's a silent majority, right? You'll hear from the ones who will tell you straight away, and there's the
Mhm.
silent majority who might not have, right?
Mm.
And it's important to understand you're communicating to the whole audience, not just some of the audience. So some will get it faster than the others, and that's just part and parcel of this, right? Of the process. So I think for me is I would rather make that mistake than not over communicate, right?
Nice.
Because the chances are, nobody has really been in trouble for over communicating, but if you under communicate, the issues that you'll have is way more. So it's always a balance, right? Where do you find the balance, and try and decide, okay, this is the way I want to do it. So that's my view. Everyone's got a different way of doing it, but that's how I've done it.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Because I think we don't often hear that it's good to over communicate, right? And I
Yeah.
think you have reiterated so many times that, I think it's, and I also love the fact that you said, if, people don't understand you, how they're going to fill up the blanks with
Yeah.
their own thinking, which may not be what you wanted to communicate. And we know that, whenever we talk to people, miscommunication is usually the number one challenge that we always have in a team, right? Now, having said that, you're putting so many things. It sounds like a lot of passion and hard work, right? To listen, to keep quiet and say thank you. I'll wait for you. For the first 5 minutes. I think that's a lot of persistence and being very focused on how you want to shift the culture and the relationship, which is fantastic, which I'm taking back, right? But what do you do then to lead a team with fairness? Because you did say something along the line of, fairness doesn't mean equal. So maybe you could tell us more, because I think we tend to assume fairness is equal.
Yeah. 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 I think and I put this in one of my posts as well on LinkedIn, right? When and this was when I had the opportunity to speak to our budding leaders. They went through one of those courses that I mentioned, and I was thinking, how do you make this interesting? And that is one of the things I say, my top 10 learnings as a leader so far, right? I'm not saying that I'm fantastic, but this is what so far I've learned. And one of them was this. This was also um, something that one of my mentors told me, right? When I first became a manager, and he said, listen, I have to tell you this. You need to understand that you can't treat everyone equally, but you have to treat everyone fairly. And I was confused, right? Just like what you're asking, isn't that the same thing? And he said, it's not, right? And he was giving this example of, you in a team, right? The logic is very simple for him, right? And he was really talking about performance more than anything else. And not everybody is going to perform at the same level, right? There are going to be the best ones, the high performers, whatnot, right? And you need to give everybody an opportunity to be a high performer. But when there are high performers, you also need to reward them differently from the ones who have not got there yet. If not, what's the difference, right? Why would they keep going? They need to be motivated. And sometimes when I say this, people say, what do you mean, more money? I say, no, opportunities. Maybe they get stretch assignments, they get a bigger role that they can, stretch themselves and really prove themselves, right? And high performers want that, right? They really want to, and you might not be able to give that opportunity to everyone, and you need to be comfortable with that, right? And because as a manager, the easiest thing to do is, let's say, and this is an example I always give, if I give you $100 and say you've got 10 people in your team, what would you do? If you say, I'm going to give each one of them $10 each, is a problem right there, right? Because you can't, right? Then imagine the person who's slogged so much and done the impossible, and the ones who have not really got there yet getting the same, recognition. It doesn't make sense, right? There was, I think, something like this was stated by Jack Welch in his book, and he mentioned about how that's when he got the same bonus as everybody else when he was an engineer when he first started in GE. And when he was working so hard and he's done so many things, he felt like he wanted to quit because he felt that his efforts are not being recognized, right? And he made sure that when he started leading, there was differentiation, because you have to have differentiation in some form or shape, right? So the fairness is really about giving everybody the opportunity to grow. That means, if you take, for example, the ones who really need more help in coaching, who might not have gone to greatness yet, you help them through the path of greatness. The ones who are doing really well, you also give them opportunities, but maybe something which is uh, even more, I would say, challenging, so that you really can challenge them and give them something bigger. And as such, you will get everybody a chance to be the best they can their own way, right? And that's important to understand, right? Because not everyone is going to run at the same speed, right? And that's what he meant by, be fair, but don't be equal, right? You can't. And I think that's what I try to do as much as possible, right? Even in all the teams that I've managed, I've tried to focus on that as much as possible, right?
Nice, thank you. I think that was so clear, right? Because I think you're doing two things. I think we all, hopefully, when we go to a workplace, we want to bring our best selves. So if
Yes.
the role can help us to bring our best selves, and some of us get there fast, some of us may not even get there because there might be an issue with the role fit, right? So
Yep.
whatever it is, what you're saying is that if you're not there, I'm going to give you every opportunity and every support I can as a leader for you to
Yep.
get there.
Yes.
However, if there are people who are going ahead of you, then I want to make sure that I am fair to them, to reward them for how they are contributing to the business goals and the organization goals, is what you're saying. So that
Right.
clarity, because a lot of times we do one and we don't do the other,
Yep.
right? But to be able to do both and feel congruent and have that clarity, I think is the mark of a great leader, I suppose.
And I think
Right.
the communication bit is also important, right, Malar? Because people also need to realize why. Because think about anyone in the team and he realizes, oh my God, I would have loved to do what he's doing or she's doing, and why didn't I get a chance?
Right.
If the question, if the person thinks along those lines, that means you're not done a great job in communicating this, right? I always tell my team, if your team is coming to you and they're upset with their performance rating, that means it's not their fault, it's your fault, because you've not, because even
Yeah.
before getting there they should have known, right? Because you would have given enough feedback and everything else. So I think that's also important, right? So people understand, right? I
Nice.
can't get there, I have all the opportunities, but I need to take this first step, and then I will possibly do really well, and then I will get there. And then that's also a step which I think people miss, right? Yeah, fair, equal, everything good, and nobody knows why, and then it goes for a toss, right? So I think that's important.
I know Ashok is dying to ask you the question, but I can't help it. How much time do you spend, if you look at a percentage, communicating as a leader?
Oh, that's hard to say.
No,
It depends on the situation. I'm going to give this consultant remark, right? It really depends, right? It does.
but if you
Um,
average it, like, so if someone you, and let's say you're my mentor and I come to you and I say, Viju, I really admire and appreciate you for always communicating and over communicating. Now I need some guideline. How much time do you think in my role that I should be spending communicating minimally?
I think for me, I would say, at least half the time is really about good communication, right? At least, right? And I tell you why, because, and this is so funny because my EA always tells me your calendar is full of one-on-one meetings and things that you're spending a lot of time with people talking about stuff. I said, yeah, you have to, right? If you don't, then how would they know what to do? Because when you're a individual contributor, it's you yourself, right? You can do it by yourself. You get you talk to your managers and then with your colleagues and your extended teams, and you can get things going. When you're a leader several levels above, you're so far away from what is happening on the ground, right? So listening, communicating, over communicating, understanding whether it's working or not, communicating at every level so that you can see whether it really makes sense becomes extremely important, right? The open door policy, you can ping me anytime, is served me well, right? Very well, because people are comfortable enough to walk in and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? It's never 5 minutes, but it helps, right? It helps a lot for me to understand, for me to also maybe uh, reject the thinking, right? We did this, we heard from you and we thought this, and I said, oh my god, I never meant it to be construed that way. It actually, this is what I meant, right? And I think half the time is really spent on that, right? On that, and maybe the thinking time, right? If you look at all our calendars is packed with all the meetings, then when do you think? So you need to really block time for that as well. So I think it's a combination of both of that. I think would be a lot. The rest of it is reviews, right? And how much time can you look at the same number and keep talking about it? You can't, right? It is what it is. And then you talk about what we can do better, and then what we've done well, and then we move to the next thing.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
No,
Long
I
winded.
think you answered me in the way I wanted to. So it's very biased because nobody says 50%. I mean, if you look at any leader's calendar, it's not easy to put aside 50%. Forget about 50%. I think even on a day, regular basis, even if we put up that, what, 20%, I think that would be quite miraculous, right? So you've, uh,
I
you've
think
the
I think 50% is also because I consider the one-on-one times, I consider reviews, I consider a lot of things as communication. There's a lot of discussion that happens. There's a lot of, hey, let's talk about this and figure out what's going on. Hey, this is what I meant. What did you feel? What was the feedback? And those things are important. I mean, I feel that is very important to do at as you grow within the organization, and as you grow within your leadership path, right? Because if not, it becomes, like I said, you're so far away from reality. If you don't start talking about this to everybody, then how would you know what's happening really? Because then you'll be like this emperor on the seat, and just, or the general just talking about, hey, troops go out there and get things done. Doesn't work. Yeah. So we have to do that, and that's why the dedication to time for that is important. It's hard. You're right. You're absolutely right, Muller. It's hard. It's because of that we end up working longer, but you find the balance, right? You have to, and that's the leadership curse, right? You have to find the balance. No one is going to help you, right? And you need to find the balance at the end of the day.
Thank you, Viju. Thank you. I really, really liked the context, that you give us so that we can think through to find our own leadership curse.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just writing the leadership curse. Yeah, I'll come back to that. But I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, and I thank you very much for giving us a clarity about fairness and being fair but not equal in that sense. Two questions spring up for me when you were talking about that. You mentioned, yes, you got to pay the better performer, or you got to reward. You never said pay. You said
Yep.
reward the better performer. And before we could say anything, you said, is it with money? You said no.
Yes.
Now, but you had a lot of power and conviction behind what you said. You straight away said, no, money is not that. What is your experience that brought you forward to say, no, it's not money first? What have you
I would
seen?
say it's not. Sorry, I cut you off. You wanted to finish
No,
your
no, no.
statement.
What have you seen? What have you seen
Yeah,
that made you say that? Is it?
I don't think. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm very clear about this. I'm not saying that money is not important because whenever
Yeah,
I
yeah,
say this,
money is
like,
important.
no,
Yep.
money is not important. Let's all work for fun. No, that doesn't
No,
happen,
no.
right?
Sure,
But
sure.
I think money is important, but money is not the only thing, right?
Mm,
That motivates people, right?
mm,
And you really need to see what really motivates people. I give an example, right? I had, and we have done this with a lot of my individual contributors who want to become managers, right?
mm.
Because some of them want to take the leadership journey, and we have to help them through the process. Is the biggest mistake that we all make, or we have made before, is just take an IC and dump him into being a manager. Then they will do all
That's right.
the first time manager mistakes, and then hate the job, and then we have to rekindle the whole joy of leading, and it's harder, right? So maybe we can do that much earlier. So what do? Can we stretch them, right? Can we give them stretch assignments? Can we see if there's something they can lead? Even being an individual contributor, you can lead um, a project, or you can lead a cross-functional initiative. You can be part of the CSR committee. Even that is leading, right?
Yeah,
Getting involved in something different, being taking the leadership role and chairing the CSR committee, and that's good, right? Then you can really start flexing your leadership muscles, your people management skills, and then you can see whether it works or not. And when you start doing that, you would start seeing people, some of them who like it, will say, well, this is great, I learned a lot and whatnot. And some might also come back and say, oh my God, I never want to do this. Now I know how tough the job is that you all are doing. I never want to be a people manager, which is fine, because at least they went through that process to learn that, right? And we gave them the opportunity, again, the opportunity to learn that, the
mm,
stretch assignments to learn that, and build the skills, right? If that helps. Whenever we have done this, and finally when we give them the opportunity to lead, a lot of them have come back to me and said, thank you for not giving me the role a year ago. I thought I was ready. Thank God you didn't give me, because now I'm so much more ready and my team can gain so much more out of me. I can help them more now because I'm prepared for this. I know exactly what it takes and I've experienced it, right? And that's a classic example of, we didn't pay anything, right?
mm.
We just made sure that the person was set up right for success. They will now get paid and all that. They will make it in terms of the performance and everything else. But figuring that out and what makes them ready and helping them grow, I think it's more important, right, than money. But of course, some of them, it's sales teams, maybe it's more cash,
Sure.
right? And that could be, even then, I think there's ways and means in which you can make that a growing exercise, right? If you start doing this, then maybe you can get that, and then you can see, people have to think different, right? So I think we must always think about how you can make them grow, right? And if that's not something that you think about, and if that's not something that motivates you, then leadership might not be what you might not be your cup of tea, right? Because
Sure.
that's where I think the magic really is, when you multiply the impact, right? Rather than just being about yourself, right?
Right. Thank you very much for that. Now, yes, don't worry. I subscribe like you. Money is important, but I
Yeah.
also subscribe to the self determination theory. And I guess I was a little biased, being wanting to hear from you, because you automatically jumped on and said you want to help people grow, and you have clearly demonstrated with this example why people enjoy learning, right? Yes, there's a career growth, but got them to learn first
Yeah.
the ropes of leadership, even through CSR, whichever, right? Lead a project first and see whether you're comfortable being who you are. Who do you want to be? So that therein, is already a learning experience, you know,
Yep.
and that experience is beyond money, right? So yes, I'm a big subscriber of self-determination theory, intrinsic motivation in that sense. I do agree that money is important. We are not here to, this is not a kumbaya world in that sense totally, right? We still need it,
Yeah.
money is important, but at the same time, it's not everything in that sense, so we need to have that balance. I'm not too sure whether that's a leadership curse that you also talked about.
No, I think, and also the different things. I mean, money doesn't motivate everybody, right? There are
Sure.
different things and also as a leader, it's our job to find out what really motivates the team. At the end of the
Absolutely
day,
right.
I think that's recognition for some. A bigger assignment, sometimes an office space or a space that I want my own space, right? And I like
Right.
that I work for that, and that becomes important. Like for lawyers, that's an extremely important thing, right? Having your own office. So I think it really depends on the person, what they want, what they really are motivated by, I would say.
Okay. I know it's important to really understand what everyone is motivated by. I think it's important to have that one-on-one conversations. You'll never know when you can bring that to stretch them, to help them grow in their experience. But I guess there are times that you might not be able to satisfy everyone. I guess that's where it's about the fair and equal, right?
And it,
Which then
yes.
leads to my second question when you were mentioning that to Mallory earlier. What are the factors that leads you to be fair?
um I think I kind of mentioned this as well before, right? You really need to give a fair chance for everyone, right,
Okay.
to do their best. I think that's important. And how do you do that? You open opportunities for people to try, right? And you're there for this is a classic, right? I am doing what I'm doing now because I've been given opportunities by my leaders to do things that I've never done before. Right? And that's a hard thing for them to say yes to. Can you imagine? Now, I'm going to give you this many people and that much dollars to look after. There needs to be some level of trust and also some level of, I think you can do it, right? Um, if you want that, you must be able to be comfortable doing that for your teams as well, right? I mean,
Mm.
are you willing to do that? So I think for me, fairness is all about giving people opportunity, right? And also really being clear. Right? I always say this, one of the reasons why I went to one of the mentors. I think I kind of forced him to be my mentor because he had such good clarity of thought, right? And I was extremely lucky. A relationship which was supposed to last for a year lasted for nearly 20. So it's fantastic, right? Until he left Singapore. Right now we are in touch, but not he's not really not really mentoring in that sense. But the clarity of thought was amazing because when he said something in that couple of sentences, I understood everything he said. I was like, wow, I know exactly what you're trying to say. And then I try and do it, and I take 3 hours to explain that, and I'll never get that. People are still confused, right? So I think that that kind of showed me that that's a skill that I need to learn because as leaders, clarity of thought is extremely important. When you are very clear, when you are clear on what is expected, then the team can go out there and do what they need to do, right, to get there.
Mm.
Second is some might not still. Then when they come back, you also need to then give feedback and course correct, right? And make sure that people understand, hey, no, but that's not what I meant. This is how you do it. Let's make sure that we get that ironed out so that we can ensure that we go in the right place and whatnot. And then finally, of course, what I always talk about, you got to reward, right, for great behaviors, right? And that's being fair. They have done everything that you asked them to do, right? And then you got to do what you need to do as a leader and stick to your end of the bargain, right? You will have to do that. And that brings me to also that the point about and I use this term with my leaders all the time. You need to fight the good fight sometimes, huh? It means you need to come and fight with me sometimes when it's very important and it's the right thing to do, right? When I might not get it, it's your job to convince me, which I have to
Mm.
do as well for with me and my leaders, right? My managers. And and that goes back to the fair portion, right? When something's happened to someone and is not fair, you need to be the one standing up and fighting for it, which might be very difficult thing to do sometimes, going and telling a manager, I think that's wrong, we need to do something, and
Mm.
sticking with it. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you standing up and doing it becomes extremely important, because that's when we show that you're fair. You are really doing everything you can to stick to the end of the bargain. You'll do what you say, and you will expect the same, right? And when you do that, there's one, uh, respect that you gain, trust that you gain, accountability that you gain, and then you'll see the performance happen. So that's, I think, that's how being fair, making sure that that's done is, it goes back to the hard right that I always talk about, and the easy wrong, right? The hard right is always that you need to go out there and do that, man. You got no choice. You're leading the team. They're all dependent on you to do this, and
Okay.
you have to do that.
It's interesting. You brought up the heart, right? And we won't delve in a little
Yep.
bit into that. But thank you again, saying what is important in terms of being fair is about leaders need to have the clarity of thought. You need to be very strong in your communication in terms of giving feedback and even course correction, like what you mentioned. And the rewarding part is important. And as leaders, fight the good fight.
Yes.
I get all of that, and you seem to be very a leader who tends to reflect a lot also. But let us get back to this hard one, all right? Tell us a little bit more. Give us a lot more context about what do you mean by hard right, easy wrong? And share with us how has that guided you in making the right choices or impactful choices?
Yeah, I think, for me, this has been uh, very fascinating, I would say. And this, I know you use this word around, because when I heard this for the first time, or when I and it came with the whole concept of fighting the good fight, right? It's extremely important to do that, because we face this every day, as humanity as well, right? Everyone wants to be popular.
Okay.
Everyone wants to pick the easy option, because it's always the first option, is the easy option to do. But I really believe that, the good things takes hard work, right? When you want long-term results, you might have to let go of short-term gains. Okay. And when you talk about a sales context of things, as sellers, we have this tendency of, the deal is right here in front of me, I can close it today. It's so difficult to say, no, let's wait, because I could probably close 3 times that in the next quarter, right? It's a very hard, right? Because you got numbers to meet and all that, right? Are you going to take the hit now, so that for the greater good, or you can make it back? Or are you going to do the easy wrong, and then you'll never get the 3x, right? That are 2x that I'm talking about. And those kind of situations, it happens every day. And this is just a sales leaders situation that I was talking about, right? It could also be another example I give you, right? We have this. Oh, when I was doing my previous role, right, we had individual contributors who need to move into the principal level, right? And from the level that they are in to the principal level is a big jump, right? They need to literally be walking on water. I normally say that, right? That's how great they are. They are one of a kind, best in the industry. Everyone knows them and whatnot. But one of the things that we used to do was, hey, you know what? Let's just get a lot of them mentored, and we'll probably get them there. Maybe out of 10 people we mentor, maybe two might do a good job, one might get the job. That's okay. That's how it is. That's the reality of things, right? And it's easy to just say, yeah, we'll just keep doing that. It's fine. One day it was interesting. One of my colleagues and I, we sat down and said, this cannot keep going on, and this it's not scalable, right? We need to do something different. And we said we actually need an entire program, something which is like 10, 15 months long, where we take them through that whole process of self-discovery,
Mhm.
nothing to do with the technical side of things, everything to do with, presenting themselves, understanding numbers, understanding the business side of things, understanding how of doing a project which is outside of your comfort zone, so that we take them on the learning journey. And that will be the right thing to do, right? He said, yes, that will also mean that's a lot of hard work. It'll mean that we have to take so many other people into the team so that we can start working on that, because we have no clue how to start, and we had to bring in people who knew how to do programs. And then I had to fight the good fight of getting the money to run the program, right? To convince an entire group of people, leaders, this is the right thing to do. And we did it. And we did it. So after about a year, we came up with the program. We had the first pilot, and that program is gone worldwide now, global. It started in APAC, it's gone global. Everyone is going through one of those individual contributor technical leadership programs that we have done, right? And we never existed before, right? Because usually we talk about management. We never look at the individual contributors who are technologists who we are trying to groom to become, master, who have mastery in their skills and who become principals, right? Who are highly respected by their peers in the industry. So that helped a lot. But if we didn't take that hard yards and put that in place, we would not have had that impact with so
Mm.
many people who have gone through it now. We suddenly started scaling the number of people who became principals because they were ready and they knew what to do. They went through the process, they were mentored, they were coached. They had to do the hard yards by doing, stretch assignments, projects which are outside their comfort zone, had to go out there and present to audiences they've never met, and they were so nervous, but they did it because they're just part and parcel of pushing them into the uncomfortable space so they could grow. So that's an example of the hard and easy, right?
Mm. Mm.
And there are always situations like that that we go through, right? We get knocked and we think that, okay, let's just make the numbers and forget about the long term impact for the customer. You can't do that. Then that's it. That'll be the only sale you'll do, right? So I think as leaders we need to constantly remind ourselves, because it's easy to take the other way around because you get instant gratification, like I always say, but you don't get long-term gains, right? So I think it's
Right.
it's always a balance trying to
So
do
you're
that.
very clear about, I think, two things that's coming over and over again with you is we're going to ask you the last question and end because we past 7 o'clock and I know we started late. I think two things, right? I think clarity of thoughts, number one, and in fact, what comes across with the clarity of thoughts is really to embrace, internalize what all the things that you think you're clear about. So I think it's the internalization is the one that really probably comes across as courage to do the hard right? Because you're not even when you're speaking about the hard right? It doesn't seem difficult for you when I see it, and that's probably because you've had a lot of practice because you know it's hard, but yet you also know that with delayed gratification, and you probably have made choices and decisions like this, and that has turned out the way you know it would, right? But to say that with confidence, I think is really fantastic. So I think, which is why, when we were talking to you, when we first met you, we were so impressed. I think there's one module that we would want you to speak about in one of our conferences, in a future conferences, would be on self-awareness, because you really show us what it means to be self-aware and continue being fascinated with the discovery of the self, and that helps you become comfortable with the uncomfortable. So thank you very much. And before we end, one quick question: how do you want to be remembered as a leader, and why is that important for you?
I One of the things I always say is, leaders are best remembered when they leave a legacy. And when I say when you leave a legacy means it's really about how your team reacts, behaves, performs when you're not there, right? If you've been a leader, and even when I say, if you're out on vacation and your team has done a great job, that reflects well on the team for sure, but that reflects well on your leadership as well, because you've given them empowerment to do really, really well, right? So for me, it's all about making sure that I help people, empower them, get them to where they need to get them to the places that they thought they could never be, right? In terms of, I never thought I could lead this bigger team. I never thought, right? Those kind of things are like, music to my ears. That means I must have had an impact on them in some form or shape, right? I hope. and helping them through that path is extremely important, because it goes back to what I said about the multiplier effect, right? If you do this for a whole bunch of people, and then you start seeing them grow, and start seeing them take on bigger roles, and start seeing them kind of articulate what some of the things that you've articulated, your impact really multiplies. So I think, a leader who is authentic, who helps people grow, who helps, leadership skills multiply in many different ways. I think, if people can remember me like that, I'll be more than thrilled, right? You know, but it's the I think that leads to everything else, right? If you spoke about the self-awareness portion and all that, that still is a big journey for me, and knowing exactly what my derailers are, understanding my biases, getting my team to tell me. And the first thing I tell my team is, okay, I'm good. I know I'm really biased about this. Please help me through this, because I know I'm going to make the wrong choice. And they do, right? And being a leader who creates a safe space where you are comfortable doing that, I think that's something that humanizing this entire thing, right? Leadership is something that I hope that people remember me by.
Right.
Right.
Thank you very much for today's session, Viju. I'm blown over. I'm fascinated. Again, apologies to all our LinkedIn viewers. We are not having this live, but we'll put the link up on LinkedIn. And again, thank you very much, Viju, for sharing with us about your views, your clarity. Yes, good things take a lot of hard work. And thank you for sharing that the leadership journey is all about learning, self-reflecting, being self-aware. It's about learning. And thank you for sharing that you need to focus on your communication, right? And that is very, very important. And again, thank you for sharing the difference between being fair to everyone, but not equal, right? So thank you for all the lessons that you've shared with all of us today, right? And that's a legacy that you are leaving for all our listeners and even for ourselves, right? And viewers. Thank you very much, Viju.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Viju.
Ashok and Malar. Really appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Any parting words before?
No, all the best. I mean, you guys got a great show. I hope that I'm definitely going to tune in next time and learn from other leaders as well. And looking forward to the comments and all that from people, right? Because it's always interesting to hear other examples and other viewpoints, because it's the learning journey, right, for all of us.
That's
So
right.
so much for
It
giving
is.
me the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as
Right.
we say goodbye to Viju, I'm
Yes.
just going to just put up something for viewers who are
Okay.
either
Okay.
as now or later. So if you are here, save the date. So, for those who are watching this, save your date, August 10. Click the link. Put in your registration. We are running Thrive for Growth. Attendance is only by invitation. So quickly get your invitation by clicking the link, registering with us, and it's complimentary. So with that, this is Malar signing off from Kuala Lumpur, and
And Ashok from Singapore. See you next week.
thank you and good night.